going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
It's hard to tell what Donald Trump's plan for Iran is. On Wednesday night, he addressed the nation, but what we got was a kind of greatest hits of his recent social media posts.
We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
One thing that is clear is that the arrival of thousands more troops in the region gives him options. And our guest today is going to talk us through those options.
Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done, so it should be easy.
On today's episode, we speak with a man who successfully predicted in the past for the White House and the Pentagon how an Iran war might unfold. We ask him what happens next. From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redman, and this is The Global Story on YouTube.
So a war game, really, it takes a lot of different forms, but at the end of the day, what you are trying to do is take policymakers and stick them in situations and scenarios that might play out in the future. Usually you have a whole bunch of different teams. Team Blue is the US or the good guys in those scenarios, and Team Red is the bad guys. It might be Iran. So if you're doing Iran, you will have Iran experts who really can try to play the role of how would the Iranians be doing this? And you have an American team that would really be made of policymakers and people who have played decision roles in the US government. You might have a European team. You might have a Russian team, all kinds of different Chinese, Israel, the Gulf. And you're trying to do is get a realistic experience as possible for the players about what they might face in different, usually conflict and war scenarios. And it's not that what you take out of this experience is, okay, this is exactly how it's going to go. You don't. It's the experience of being in it and thinking through what the different actors might value, how they might do this, what they're going to be thinking, what the biggest strategic questions and challenges are going to be. And you take insights out of that and you take it back for the rest of your knowledge. And it really helps you inform how you're thinking about policy and how you plan for these possible scenarios.
In all the war games you've run, how does a conflict between the United States and Iran generally start?
So the first step in most war games that I played on Iran was an Israeli strike on Iran. Israel decides it's going to go after the nuclear program. And then you would see how all the actors react to that. And in many ways, that first step is what we actually saw in June of last year, when Israel does strike Iran, starting with the nuclear program and key elements of it. And the biggest insight that you would take from that step one, usually, is Iran would respond. It would respond proportionally against Israel. It might do some other small things in the region, maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, the Iranian team's preoccupation in that first phase and in that scenario was, how do we avoid having the U.S. come in? Because as long as it's just Israel attacking us, that doesn't fundamentally threaten our existence and our regime. If the U.S. comes in and starts going after us, now that's an existential threat. So the Iranians usually in that first step would be de-escalating or very tactical in their response. The U.S. team usually was trying to avoid getting deeply sucked in as well. But one thing we did find a lot in that first step is that we always knew as the Americans that the Israelis couldn't actually take out fully the nuclear program. And so it was also always a question of, well, now that the Israelis have taken out half of it, what do we do with the rest? And that becomes a really hard question for the American team. And we saw that play out last June too, right? It was Israel that started the war and got, deeply involved. But at the end of the day, before the war ended, Donald Trump did order American military forces to essentially destroy the Fordo nuclear facility, drop a 20,000-pound bomb basically down an air chute to take out that facility, because that was very much something that happened in some of the games that I previously played. But even with that, you'd ultimately end up with a scenario where you are able to successfully de-escalate that first step, which is actually what happened in June.
Yeah, so they went in June, they attacked the Iranian nuclear program and then essentially pulled back. But how would it continue in the scenarios that you've played?
Scenarios that I played, then usually part of the way these war games work is you have people from the outside who are running it who purposefully at moments inject to force, okay, what if we go a step beyond this? What if the US does really get involved? So they would then, you add things that make sure that happens. And so then you usually would end up playing a step two where, yeah, the US gets directly involved and things start to escalate. And the most important initial finding that you take once you get to step two is once the U.S. gets deeply involved and is in, then Iran is in, fully in. And at that point, they think they're fighting for their lives, and they go from restraint and de-escalation to trying to exact as much cost as possible to get the U.S. to back down.
And what does that look like?
Well, it looks a lot like what we're seeing now, right? The Iranian team, Trump has said, nobody expected this to happen.
In the last 2 weeks, they weren't supposed to go after all these other countries in the Middle East. Those missiles were set to go after them. So they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that.